Hi, I'm Rose. Here with me today is Dr. Michele Borba, educational psychologist and author. Today we'll be talking about what else? Parenting. Dr. Borba, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It's our pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Now, your book is titled The Unselfie. What distinguishes a child from being an unselfie?
Think about an unselfie child as we, and a selfie as me. So what we're looking at is a child who thinks about others. That's an unselfie. Who's not so self-absorbed, but he's a collaborator. He's more of an innovator. He's more of what would she want? What we're looking at right now is a very big concern, and that the majority of our children are coming out right now as selfies.
Right, so it's actually okay to ask for a selfie shot. I was actually a little paranoid to ask you today if I
you
could
can,
have one with you.
because that was we. We were in it, weren't we?
That's right,
But
yes.
it's an interesting trend is just to look at how your child, their virtual persona. Check out their Facebook, check out their Instagram. And if it's always about how I look or what I'm wearing or what kind of brand I own, then there it's a concern, because that already gives you a little connotation of they're becoming more and more self-absorbed, and self-absorption kills empathy. That's why we need to be concerned about all of this.
Right. Now, what inspired you to write the book? There has to be a good story, I know.
The first step was I was actually sitting on the killing fields.
Wait, the killing field?
The killing fields in Cambodia, where millions of people were massacred. And I was sitting on a bench, and off to the side was a tree which had all these little ribbons, and each ribbon represented a child who'd been slaughtered at that tree because they were crying too hard. And it was my, oh my gosh moment. But it went from there, where on the next moment, a week later, I was in Rwanda doing a film shoot in Rwanda and started interviewing people after the genocide. And then I went from there to work on to Pentagon, hired me to work on overseas army bases, and I took a side trip to Dachau. So it was this crunched week. But the fascinating thing is, each place I worked at of absolute horror, I'd always wonder, okay, but what would have created the goodness? And what I found in the spots were these fabulous books by social psychologists who had interviewed rescuers who risked their lives to help perfect strangers. And the fascinating thing is, in each case, when they asked the rescuer, why did you do it? It was how I was raised. If how you raise a child has that big of an impact on their goodness, then what I tried to do is look at the latest science. What does it say that we can do to raise better kids?
Right. Powerful, very powerful.
It was a tough month.
I'm sure it was. Now, you say that there's an empathy crisis.
Yes. And the empathy crisis is that some fascinating researchers in the University of Michigan and actually San Diego have been for 30 years tracking over 72 studies. And what they've done is each incoming college freshman, they take samples of them, but we're talking thousands of them over 30 years, are given this simple little narcissism personality inventory. And in the last 30 years, regardless of zip code, regardless of gender, what we're finding is a 40% drop in empathy and a 58% increase in narcissism.
Wow.
Now that's when there's a red flag going, something is amiss here, because the more self-absorbed our children get, there's a direct correlation, the less the empathy happens.
So what's causing this?
It's a toxic
empathy crisis.
It's a real toxic trio, because when I was writing Unselfie, in each chapter that I discovered there's habits that rebuild it, I also discovered there's causes for it. And it's not one thing. It's kind of like pollution. All of a sudden you look and you go, gee, the world is brown. Didn't get that way overnight. It's the steady part. First, certainly social media, only because we've been so focused and so driven to looking at screens that we're not looking at each other. And the first step to really boosting empathy is realizing the other person exists, and then being able to read the emotions off of that person. You can't feel for another human being unless you know she looks sad, or now is not the time to ask daddy for the salary raise. You know, it's like those things. The second thing was our culture is becoming kind of racier and raunchier. Just look at just the TV, what's going on. As that happens, though, what we're also seeing is good, solid role models are going down for our kids. That has an impact. Over just the last 10 years. 10 years ago, our kids wanted to grow up and be a leader or a president or a doctor or a teacher. Now the top things on their list are a celebrity. No, a celebrity or an NFL player, because it's all fame and fortune. And then finally, parenting styles. What we've really discovered is that unfortunately, when we parent our kids, are getting further and further away from what the real science says matters. And so what I really was trying to do when I wrote Unselfie is track what are the actual parenting practices that we should be using that raises a more empathic kid.
Right. So how can we do that? How can we raise more empathic
Well,
kids?
number one, you've got to be intentional and say, I want an empathic kid. Because the first thing
Okay,
we're
I want
doing
an
is
empathic kid.
good for you. Because the first thing we're
Or
doing
2
wrong
empathic
is
kids.
we have such a narrow view of success that it's all a GPA. When's the last time you saw a bumper sticker on the back of a parent's card that said, proud parent of a kind kid? It's all about he's on the honor roll, he's doing this, and that sends a message. Our discipline, NYU, right around the corner from here, did the best thing. We're doing it wrong. That quick fix timeout, yeah, okay, fine that we're disappointed in the behavior. But it's when the child comes back, I'm disappointed in your behavior because I see you as a caring kid. Here's what I expect, so how are you going to redo that the next time? Those are the
Great
moments
tip.
that build the empathy.
In chapter 8, you talk about moral courage.
Yes.
And surprisingly, you wrote about Navy SEALs and how they shared 4 strategies with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it was at the Army bases again, when the Pentagon and the commanders were very concerned about suicide rates and depression amongst our troops. And so what they did is they began to reframe simple techniques that would prepare our troops. And as I looked at that, I went, those are the most profound things I've ever heard that would actually, if we taught those to our kids, it would open up their courage. A little point on that. Empathy is wonderful, but it's limiting. You can still feel for another human being. So what? I want you to be able to step in and go, how can I help you? That's chapter 8 in moral courage. So kids need to know how to handle the stress and the anxiety. If it goes up, they dial down their empathy. Step 1 is real simple. What Navy SEALs, the most elite troops we have, actually are trained to do is first teach themselves a positive affirmation. How easy is that? But it's like, I can do it. I can be cool. One simple sentence about what you stand for, not at the moment you're upset because it doesn't work, but if you practice that with your child over and over again, when that moment comes, he's going to be able to at least do a self-talk and help himself get down. Mental rehearsal. They train themselves to prepare themselves for the fear. And now what we know is we don't do that for our children. When your child says, I can't get through the day, you say, let's get through the first hour and let's figure out what are you worried about. Let's plan how you're going to walk in and see yourself of what the problems are you're concerned about. Or see when you get on that bus that you're worried. So where will you sit instead? What will you say to the bus driver when you walk on? The more we rehearse the habit with our child, the more it kicks in. Best tip on that one is don't tell your child, show him when he rehearses it. Third one is deep breathing. Tell your child take a deep, slow breath when he starts to feel stressed. That's so simple.
Right.
But what we've discovered is the fastest relaxation process there is. Take it deep from here, and then hold it, and if you let it out twice as long as the exhale is twice as long as the in, I am so relaxed right now. It's unbelievable.
You know, I do the, I breathe with my children. That's actually my first strategy.
That's wonderful.
But I actually like preparing them and going through the scenario of what, what to expect and, how to plan on what to do.
Yes.
Because that's
it
genius.
prepares them.
Yes, it prepares
And the
them.
fourth thing that's really wonderful is it's called chunk it. Instead of seeing, I can't get through the whole day, don't. Get through the first minute. What the Navy SEALs do is they never start to think about the entire thing. It's step by step by step. So there's so many strategies in Unselfie, but I looked at those and went, that's just absolutely profound. We've never seen so much stress in our children, and we've never seen so many kids who are so anxious. We're starting at age 3.
Yeah.
And it's because they tell me, but nobody's telling me what to do instead. Try those things.
Right, absolutely. Great tips. Now, most of us are plugged in 24/7.
Yep.
Right? So with all the technology going
Yep.
on, how do we turn that as parents? How can we turn the dynamics of our kids constantly being plugged in?
First of all, we have to be aware that our kids are constantly plugged in. 1/3 of our infants are now on iPads.
I've seen
Now, what that means in terms of
Seen that.
the warning signs, you can't learn empathy facing a screen. You have to look at a human face. So the first thing we all need to do as parents is come up with some sacred unplugged times. I don't care when it is. It could be the family dinner hour. It could be the breakfast time. It could be at 5 o'clock. That's the first thing is set up your sacred unplugged times, and then all you have to do is tell your most verbal kid to be your reminder. And he'll always remind you, it's sacred unplugged times. Put down your own phone. Our children are modeling us, and they do not like us putting in. But the third thing is teach your kids one simple tip. Always look at the color of the talker's eyes.
So are we reaching more men?
No, we're not, because at an earlier age, we're not. We need to start talking feelings. By the way, if fathers are empathetic, they're far better dads.
Right. Well, I mean, I talk, empathy with my son. He's always,
Yes.
maybe a little too much, but he's always like, and now every time, something bothers him, Mom,
Yeah.
can I talk to you?
Yeah,
He takes me
but
aside.
the cool thing is first,
great.
that's wonderful, because that's the seeds of the relationship, and that's what you need to do. But there's also a formula called feels plus needs you can use. And that is when he's concerned about himself, you can also start flipping it to concerned about somebody else. Well, how would you feel if that happened to you? Oh, so what does he need in order to feel better? Oh, so what will you do? If we start getting kids to not think so much
About
me, but
themselves. Sure.
we start really opening up empathy because we're robbing our kids with the self-absorption.
Right. And now also, don't children have a tendency to run away with that and then start to use that as a tool to build a relationship with you?
Yes.
So if you turn it more about them and how they would feel about others,
Yes.
I could see that possibly changing the dynamic.
The first thing is we want a relationship with our child. That's the seeds of empathy. But one thing that we do know robs our children is too much bubble wrapping or overprotecting them. If we want a morally courageous child, what we've got to be able to do is say, I'm so glad you came to me. And then your next step is, let's brainstorm what you could do differently next time. What you're actually doing is putting the power back to the child. It builds self-efficacy and confidence. And the child, first of all, goes, Mommy knows that I can do this. But he may not know what's the first step to get started. One of the most brilliant skills that you can teach a child is, so what else could you do next time?
You've done a lot of research on bully prevention.
Yeah.
What can communities do to help reinforce, the bullying policies?
Well, I think the first thing we've got to keep in mind is that 50 states have now passed anti-bullying policies. Policies do not stop bullying. It is a process, not a program that works. So the first thing we've all got to do as parents, starting at a very early age, is stop any bullying behavior. Bullying is learned, and it can be unlearned. What we're seeing is 20% of our kindergartners now engaging in it. Wow. That means is that they're seeing mean mommies, or they're seeing mean daddies, or they're realizing it works. So catch your child, but feel free to open up the village and catch somebody else's child. No, let's redo that. And you can do that on the spot. Let's start that again. How are you going to say that the nice way? Because what happens is children begin to catch behaviors. And when it works, they'll keep doing them over and over again. There are fabulous communities also, for instance, that are reading Unselfie together. I just came back from Harvard, and they were actually creating Unselfie schools where let's start working together and let's figure out how do you create a we school, not a me school. Let's start also realizing that 85% of kids are not a bully or a victim, they're a bystander. And what all those kids are saying they desperately want is to have somebody teach them, what can I do to help this kid? It makes me feel so bad, but I don't know what to do. They're also scared to death, and rightly so, for themselves. So what I do is teach actual, what I call Upstander skills. In fact, there's a whole acronym called Upstand, or Stand Up, in Chapter 8. But as simple ones you can do. You can role play with your child. If you see you're being hurt over there and that's your buddy, go walk a little closer to that person. You don't have to say anything if you're scared. Just walk closer. Because you see, bullies love audiences. What you're doing is drawing the audience away from over here. Maybe one other person will join you here. You can speak up, but you don't have to speak up, because the scariest thing is to speak up to a bully. Turn and speak up to the other kids. That's wrong. Let's go help. You can just say that to one other kid. You can go tell her, you can go text. If you don't feel safe or you know your friend isn't safe, you can sneak away and go this way. I've seen some children who are absolutely brilliant. One strategy is called use a distraction. I've seen a high school kid who was absolutely brilliant. He threw his backpack on the ground. He did it on purpose, but he made it look like an accident. Ow, I need help. Can you guys help me? And he got the audience from here over to here.
And they all helped him.
There's so many different strategies. But you've got to realize first is that not one strategy works for one child. You've got to give them a repertoire. And then, remember, you show, you don't tell. So you rehearse one little strategy at a time. I've seen many communities who are also starting Upstander groups. Maybe it's the AYSO coach.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the Girl Scout leader. Maybe it's you, the mom. Let's get some kids together and show them what they can do to be good, upstanding kids, because this is hurting them as well as the child who's the bully, as well as the victim.
Yeah, I agree. When are you moving in?
I would love to.
Please, come and live with me.
Yeah, it's a tough world out there.
It is, but yeah, I mean, like I said, the work you're doing is just amazing.
Well, thank
Really
you.
is.
I
Such a
think we
gift.
forget, though, that empathy is made up of habits. It's not like, okay, it's 6 o'clock, let's teach empathy, kids. No, it's us modeling it ourselves. It's teaching specific habits one at a time. And if you keep repeating just the same little thing a minute a day for around 21 days, you'll make a difference. My girlfriend had the easiest habits. My favorite one is called in a chapter called Practicing Kindness. She has 3 daughters, and I've watched her raise them since they were this size, but she wanted them to grow up kind. So as they walked out the door, starting at age 3, she had one rule. It was called the 2 kind rule. When you walk out, you say or do at least 2 kind things to somebody today. And at dinner time, let's talk about it. Well, they did it so often. They developed this caring
Beautiful
mindset.
habit.
Yeah, they're smart kids, but they're also really kind-hearted.
Your dedication of Unselfie.
It was to a father, and it was about 10 years ago. I was doing a speech in Canada, and I was talking about that empathy is the best antidote we have to bullying. And at the end of the speech, I was still standing on the stage, and I noticed that there was somebody off to the corner, a dad, who was beckoning me to come over. So I walked up to him and asked him, everything okay? And he said, yeah, but I want you to promise me that you will never stop talking empathy. And I said, well, I won't. He said, no, you must promise me. And he hands me this photograph, this precious little boy. I said, oh, he's precious. He goes, yes, it's my 12-year-old son. I found him with a rope around his neck. He killed himself because he'd been bullied to death. But if those boys had empathy, my son would be alive today. Well, I kept my promise to the father, and I dedicated the book to him. Empathy, it's the best hope we have to stopping some really horrific cruelty.
Michele, where can we find out more information about what's going on, where you are, and what you're doing?
My website is micheleborba.com. I'm a 1L girl, Michele, or I'm on Twitter at Michele Borba. You can also download a free educational discussion guide to get schools for creating unselfie kind of schools.
That's great.
Or a parent guide, so that let's start talking, let's do book clubs, but let's start reaching kids early.
Right.
So we start prioritizing.
I'm
kindness.
downloading both, and
Thank
I'm taking it to my kids' school, and I'll have it for myself as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.